Welcome, everyone, to Wizards and Warp Drives, the podcast where two grown-ass men get deeply nerdy about the things they love. My name is Nacho, and joining me this week is Fred from How to RPG.
How's it going, buddy? So we're doing the Dungeon Master Guide. Oh my gosh, the thing, and we're discussing about like, do we really want to talk about it? And it's like, not really, but we will. It's a funny place to be.
Yeah. Okay. So so AJ is away this week. So Fred and I were thinking, what should we talk about? We've both had 10 days. I think we've had this thing now. 2024 DMG. This isn't sponsored. I paid for it. Fred gets it through his I think it's a legacy subscription or something you have with.
It's AJ gets a legacy thing. It's a product of people who want me to talk about this, who just give me free access, who actually do pay for it. So I don't pay for it at all.
Yeah. So up front, this is our opinions. We're not in the pocket of anyone. Wizards of the Coast aren't paying us to say anything nice. And with AJ not being here, we should stay on topic. So we are going to just give our initial thoughts of the 2024 Dungeon Master Guide. What we think of it. We're going to break it down chapter by chapter. Fred's got he's got a bit of an opinion on a few things in here, and so do I.
So I have a question. Before we even look at the chapters, was there anything that really stood out for you with regard to this book, even before you sort of really opened the book?
It really felt like they were they had recognised that the 2014 Dungeon Master Guide wasn't good, and out of all the three core books, I got the sense that this is the one they were really making an effort to fix. So I had high expectations. I do like the 2014 Dungeon Master Guide, but you do have to dig a lot. Like, it's not. I'm possibly one of the few people that have read it.
I've read it.
Yeah, I don't think many people have. I think most people just use it as a magic item resource book.
No, they use it as a stand to hold up and get their computer monitor in the right position.
Yeah.
That's often what it's used for, is just to move things a little bit higher.
So I've got my 2014 one here. This is how so badly organized it is. I personally made a PDF of all the important information that I want to find in it and glued it to the inside of my 2014. So I had to make my own appendix, essentially. So I knew where like tavern name generator is, random urban encounters are, where selling a magic item is, just the things that come up in your game. I put those in the front page of my 2014 DMG. I'm hoping I don't have to do this with the 2024, because as a nerd that loves books, it breaks my heart that I have to super glue something to the inside cover of my book just for it to be useful.
So what you were talking about is really your own index, and the 2014 Dungeon Master Guide does have a contents page, but you can't find necessarily everything you're looking for in the contents page. So you have an index, and there is an index, right? And I approve. They put an index in there, but unfortunately, for some strange reason, the 2014 book, even with the inclusion of an index and having a contents page, between the two, you still can't find everything that you need to be able to get, because it's just not referenced that way. And it's strange that happened. There's really no good reason for that to have taken place, unless they paid the person who did the indexing too little money. That's the only thing I can think of, is they just didn't pay the person who was doing the indexing enough money to make sure that you could find everything you needed to find.
But I guess the rule set is in the back now of the player's handbook instead. So you would be using that more as your index moving forward.
Yeah, I haven't got the physical book, so I don't know what the indexing is like.
No, neither have I. Yeah. Mine is on its way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
So,
let's get into chapter one, shall
well,
we?
I just wanted to just quickly say is that, like, first off, I don't have a big issue with the cover art. Like, I mean, all the art in there is high quality art. It's color
Mm.
art. It is high quality. It's not all of my cup of tea, but I'm not also like hating on all the art in this book because I don't think it's all kiddie stuff or all teenage cartoony stuff, and so I actually think there's some pretty good stuff in here, not just stuff that wouldn't suit me.
I,
Um,
I'm saving my opinion of the art until I have the physical book. I felt I didn't appreciate the art with the player's handbook until I got the physical player's handbook.
mhm. Yeah,
Same as you, I really like some of it. I don't particularly like some.
mm,
I don't like the cutesy tracking sheet art. I mean,
yeah,
it's
yeah. We can get to
that
that.
really
Yeah.
does feel like it's aimed at a 13-year-old girl. I like
Well,
my
it's
dungeons.
probably younger than that. Do you know what I
Mm,
mean? Almost feels like it's younger than that. The text of the size they tell us is supposed to be increased. So text size in all books is supposed to be larger, which is great because I've got old eyes, and so that definitely appeals to the people with who wear glasses
yeah,
and have old eyes. I don't necessarily think it's going to be a big issue for other people who don't wear glasses and don't have old eyes.
it's hard to tell the text size because of
Yeah,
my
D and
font
D Beyond.
setting I have on on my
Yeah,
digital version is not actually. I have it up high anyway. So
yeah. I just banged it up. Yeah, I think this book is more well organized compared to 2014, the new book.
mm,
And I did a review on the 2014 Dungeon Master Guide book about 3 years ago, and I slammed it really hard
yeah.
because it needed to be slammed hard for
Mm.
many different reasons.
Out of the
Uh,
three core books, it's the weakest by
yeah,
far.
and it was also the worst Dungeon Master Guide that Wizards of the Coast had
Yeah.
made, and they had done about 6 Dungeon Master Guides at that point.
Mm.
Um, and what's interesting is, and I've seen this on a lot of YouTube channels, is Wizards of the Coast. I almost feel like they might have watched my video and everybody else's video because they have tried very hard, by the looks of it, to address all the complaints that
Mm.
whiners like myself and other YouTubers had brought forward and tried to fix that stuff.
There's an argument that the 2014 Dungeon Master Guide was so bad that it created a cottage industry of YouTubers teaching Dungeon Masters how to play the game.
I don't think that's an argument. I think that's absolutely correct.
Mm.
And this book is very good for dungeon masters who are new, starting out, or very little experience. Probably not so useful, and almost actually
Mm.
probably not useful at all for experienced dungeon masters who already have a dungeon master guide and already have experience. They're probably not going to use this thing. But if
That's
you're new, you pretty much this book I think puts out of business all YouTubers trying to do videos on guidance on how to do it now.
mm.
It might be
that's
my
that's
opinion.
fair, and that's what a core book should be. It shouldn't be aimed at an experienced game master. It should be aimed at teaching people how to play the game. You save your experienced Dungeon Master book for Dungeon Master Guide number 2, or whatever they want to call it. That's usually your next one. But
Yeah,
yeah, and say what you want about fourth edition. Really good DMGs. Fourth edition had really good DMGs.
yeah,
All right, so do you want to get into the
yeah.
chapters? Okay. First thing, which is great, 2014's Dungeon Master Guide, the basics. What a good title. 2024 starts off with the basics. Such an improvement over 2014, which started with a world of your own, and straight
Well,
out.
yeah, it was basically world building, campaign building, and it didn't really explain to you how to do that anyway.
No.
Yeah, it really was not a very good guide. In fact, I had a look at the 2014 version, and it almost felt like it was copy pasted from an old version of a DMG that they had printed, with
Mm.
a bit of alteration so that the text wasn't completely the same, but the whole layout, the way it was presented was almost identical. It really hadn't changed at all. And that would be fine if that was a good way of doing it, but it wasn't really a very good way of doing it. But this is fast improvement.
Yeah. 2014, I don't believe we got to running the game to about page 230 something, something ridiculous like that.
Yeah.
So this offers a lot more foundational advice, sort of step-by-step guidance for running a session, preparing adventures. It teaches you the principles of focusing on fun, engagement over more. It is really tells the game master to that, tips for sort of managing antisocial players, how to create a more fun, engaging game rather than rule-heavy games.
Mm.
I feel.
It's more of, I feel like, since my area of expertise is teaching, I feel like this is more simple tips to be a facilitator rather than a lecturer. Do you
Hmm,
know what I mean?
yeah.
Or a teacher. So, and that's probably a good thing. And then the role of the dungeon master, they do actually break down like what is your role, but they also do explain that that you shouldn't necessarily be the only one who is helping to manage the table. There's a whole lot of other people there, and certainly you could be doing that, but it's not on you alone. That the group is very much part of that element. So listing sort of the roles does help. They talk about breaking up your task list and assigning things to other people, which is great. And uh, on top of just the simple tips, this is probably one of the times where I see them attempting to do something around the strategies for preparing a game session with steps and different time frames. It's a smart idea. It really is. I would only say that there probably are a few steps that are missing,
Hmm.
unfortunately.
Yeah, so the subheaders are: what does a DM do? The things you need to prepare for a session, how to run a session, examples of play. Every dungeon master is unique, ensuring fun for all, mutual respect, respect for the players, respect for the DM. Preparing a session is great. It is something I feel almost should be an entire chapter. I really like how this little breakdown they have in here about if you've got an hour, this is what you should focus on. If you've got 2 hours, this is what you should focus on. 3 hours.
Mm,
That is really, really good. Um, I still think it's a little bit thin.
it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Um,
And you know this, and I know this, because we have to prep for games. And so we know what is missing. And a lot of the things that are missing is around NPCs.
yep.
Like NPCs, I mean, you have to prepare for monsters, and you definitely need to prepare encounters, and you need to have a hook and a way of getting the players involved, and you have to have an idea of how things may or may not play out, or at least have some sort of structure. And I don't mean like a railroad. What I mean is this a sandbox where they can go anywhere, and you've got your. But there's really no talk about maps. There's really no talk about
No.
locations. Even a sentence on a location is quite important when you're prepping, and even a sentence on an NPC so that you have a name, kind of what they might look like, what makes them stand out. They've got a nose ring, or their personality trait
Yep.
and their motivation. Not every
Yeah.
NPC is going to have a secret, and they do have tracking sheets for NPCs in here, but even the tracking sheets doesn't quite line up with the things that I think you would actually need. And you could say, well, secrets is really just motivations. And I wouldn't disagree with that.
Mm,
But yeah, the preparation, and I would have liked to have seen a half-hour preparation structure as well,
mm.
because you probably were aware of this, Nacho. There are times where an hour is just not even going to happen.
Yep.
That's just not going to happen.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I mean, there's different types of games. So
Mm,
preparing to run a dungeon compared to um, preparing to run in a travel-based encounter, or a urban environment, or a sandbox. There's, yeah, like you say, what do you do when your players want to loot an NPC?
mm,
How do you approach that? Because they do all
yeah.
the time. Um, just yeah, there's just little tips. I'm really good at preparing dungeons. It's something that I've gotten really, just little tips of having the map and just making one word sort of indicators that help me
Mm.
remember a room or what's in there without having to flip through the book. So I feel that it's good that it's there, but I I wish that was an entire chapter.
Yeah, I almost feel like I wish they had looked at getting their advice from Mike Shea,
Mike Shea, yeah,
Sly Flourish, because his
yep,
preparation method is one of the most solid and sensible ways to do things.
yep,
And they approach so many celebrity dungeon master guides to check and review this book that they could have done it.
mm,
But their example of play is, it's quite extensive. I don't know if it's exactly what you needed. What I did like was the running sessions, very detailed, very accurate, really good advice. It's good advice. And they finally include session 0, which I did last night actually with my group for Shadow Dark. And
yeah,
it has good coverage, and it also includes the social contract and the context of the game,
yep,
which we really didn't have a lot. I mean, if anything, really, in the last one.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice that they mentioned the recap. The DM can do the recap, or the players can do the recap.
Mm,
I always find it's good to have the players do the recap because it helps you know what has cemented with the players and what you can build on,
mm.
what has worked, what hasn't worked. Yeah,
Did you
uh,
did, did you notice that there's a part in that section of that book where the book explains the rules are not set in stone. They're not
hmm
physics. They're not
yeah, yeah,
economics.
but yeah, yep,
Yeah, and something that I think gets lost on new people, and particularly the nerdy extremists, the fundamentalists, where the rules are not viewed as abstract, but they are part
yep,
of duplication of real world mechanics, and they must always line up with that. And then the concept of interpreting the rules in good faith,
mm,
for everybody's benefit, not for how can I really break the game or be more better than everybody else at the
right,
table or screw with the dungeon master because we consider them no longer our friend but some sort of um, you know
yeah. You're
tyrant.
in competition with your players, and
Yeah.
you will get players that want to break you and think it's actually fun that they have broken your game.
Mm.
I hate those players, but yeah,
Yeah.
and like you say, like even if someone rolls an natural 20, like they might be trying to. The common one is I seduce the dragon, or I pull them. It's something absolutely ridiculous, and you can certainly try to do that, but just because you roll a natural 20 does not mean that ridiculous scenario that you're proposing is going to go down.
So this is one of the things where I have a view of how dice rolls work, and I've always been of the opinion that if you roll a 20-sided dice and you can't succeed on a 20-sided dice, it's really a fuck you player
Mm,
for not allowing it to happen. But I do not believe that everything that you want to do should involve rolling a dice. So if I don't ask for a dice roll on something, that means you are either going to automatically succeed and there is no requirement for a dice roll, or it is impossible for you to succeed and there's no point you picking up the dice and saying, I want to roll a. No, just
mm,
sit back down, buddy, and just calm down because if I want you to roll a dice, I will let you know.
yeah.
And yeah, and I think this has always been my opinion that if you can't succeed, then do not allow them to roll a dice. Okay.
Mm,
If you can't succeed, if you can, don't ask them to roll the dice. What's the point? So that's always been my sort of approach. I've noticed this in Shadow Dark rather than D&D. They did try to do this, and I believe it is even included as a variant rule or a different way of doing dice mechanics in this Dungeon Master Guide, which is nice to see. But yeah, I agree. It's good to see that there. They talk about player behavior. So this is the section that sort of eliminates the YouTuber because they talk about player behavior. They talk about exploiting the rules, but they also talk about anti-social fantasies and things that are not healthy for the group game, which is really good to see included here this time round.
Yeah,
But go ahead.
and I do like that they mentioned that every DM is different.
Yeah,
We're not all Matt Mercer.
yeah,
Um, some of us run some of us run silly games. I'm a silly game dungeon master.
mm,
Some run more sort of gritty, mature games,
yeah,
and yeah, house rules as well. It's good that
mm,
they mention it's up to if something doesn't work in your game, then make it a house rule.
yeah,
There's a lot of good stuff. It really does seem to uh, reflect on fun first, how to manage player types,
yeah,
and deal with over prepping as a dungeon master. So they're all good. They're all
mm,
good topics to kick off
yeah.
DMG.
I did notice that they did also include two different methods, which is really simple stuff. Two methods for tracking monster hit points. Really simple, useful for new players, new people. Either use the subtraction method or use the adding method, whichever one you find easier. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
I use the subtraction method because I can do adding and subtracting just either way. It doesn't matter for me. But I know some people just add the numbers on until they get to the full hit points for the monster, and then they know it's dead.
Yeah.
So
One thing,
just
one thing I'm surprised they didn't plug in here was D&D Beyond maps. I thought they might have sort of snuck that in there as an option.
well, I think they do talk about in the next chapter they do talk about what you need. But what I did also notice is there is no guidance or mention of theatre of the mind. Even when most of the design team uses exclusively theatre of the mind, don't use miniatures and maps. And I think this is probably a product of maybe executives at Hasbro saying, we can't make money off an approach where you don't use miniatures and maps or a virtual tabletop. Please do not include advice on how to do this. Um, and I expect that's probably why it was left out of the book completely. And I looked through all the chapters, couldn't find a thing.
It's
But
really strange as Theatre of the Mind has taken over my games in the last year. I I spent ages obsessing about maps and buying miniatures, and now quite often because I'm learning to run more impulsive encounters, so I'm not prepared with my maps and miniatures like I used to be. I'm rolling on tables and just making up encounters in an effort to be more of a sort of more little spontaneous DM, I guess. And most of my players, I'm like, oh, do you want me to draw a map up? And they are, no, let's just do Theatre of Mind. They're
mm,
a lot more down for Theatre of the Mind. So, yeah, just because it's a lot more fast paced
yeah. I
way
mean,
of playing.
if I use theatre of the mind, I can run. I like Super Atomic, for example. The other day, I ran 6 combats. We completed the entire adventure in 3 hours. I ran Shadow Dark, and we completed it in less than, well, probably about 3 hours as well. And I think out of all I think a lot of the things they just talked to used theatre of the mind the whole time. And I think they had about five or six battles as well, and talked a whole lot of shit and found a whole lot of stuff. And we finished that adventure completely as well. And it's just so much more efficient. Yeah.
All right, final thoughts on chapter one?
No, I think it's a solid entry. I just wish the preparing stuff was a little bit more well thought out.
Yeah, I wish preparing the game was a full chapter.
Mm.
I think it'd easily be a full chapter. And like you say, Mike Shea runs. So, Lazy DM, what's his book called? Return of the Lazy DM?
Return of the Lazy DM. There is
Yep.
also just the Lazy DM, but I believe the Return of the Lazy DM is
I
a
have it as
improvement.
as an audio book. I think you can get it quite easily.
Mm,
And I listen to it probably once a year, and
mm.
it's always I skim through it. It's got some great advice. Right, chapter 2, rather than chapter 8 this time. Major improvement straight away that this is in chapter 2, not chapter 8. You don't have to get running the game.
Mm.
So we've got know your players, group size, multiple DMs, narration, resolving outcomes, and then that kind of like has little subheadings of ability checks, attack rolls, saving throws, difficult classes.
Yeah.
advantage and disadvantage, consequences, improvising damage, improvising answers. Then we've got running social interactions, running exploration, running combat, and character advancement.
So there were some things that I noticed about the very first part of this. Like, there is significantly better coverage of player styles here in this book compared to the 2014 book, which had like one page to do all of it. It's not as detailed as the Dungeon Master Guide for 4E or the second Dungeon Master that 4E put out. But I've noticed what they've done is they have only cottoned on to the things you should do for that player style, not the things you shouldn't do. And I think the reason for that 4E had those, is when I was looking through them, some of the things in the 4E book that said, don't do these things for this player style because it will create problems for you, were often in conflict with some of the things you were supposed to do for a different player style. So I think they have eliminated that so you don't have contradictions taking place. So it's only about what you should do, not about what you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the group sizes thing, like dealing with different group sizes, they give you a lot of strategies for dealing with a small group that you can approach, a lot of different strategies for dealing with large groups, which is all great stuff. And absent players in the group, there are multiple solutions for dealing with absent
That's a good
players.
one. That's a
Yeah.
good one. That's one I tripped over for ages. Absent players, like, because scheduling is the biggest enemy of Dungeons and Dragons,
Hmm.
and you always have a player last minute cancel on you, and then do I play, do I not play? And my advice is always, if you've only have one player cancel, just push forward. You'll be a better DM. And I like the fact that they say just ignore it, because that is the best advice. I used to come up with these sort of stupid, contrived, bloody
Hmm.
reasons why this player wasn't here, and then I actually was educating my players that that was something I was prepared to do, and then that player would turn up. Oh, where was I during all of last week? And I'd have to come up with some backstory. And then the day I realized, like, this isn't my fucking problem. I don't know, mate. You just weren't here, but you're here now. Was such a massive weight off my shoulder, like, or pushing that back onto your player to go, well, you figure out where you were
Yeah, it's the
during
rule
this.
of I don't give a shit about all the
Yeah,
little things, really.
yeah,
You know what
yeah.
I mean? And they haven't written in here some advice, and probably they should. You will make your life so much easier as a dungeon master if you just don't give a shit about the little things, even when people tell you they are big things.
Because reality check, your home game is not going to be Critical Role. You are not writing this epic live sort of story that everyone's got an overall arc and you're connecting everything together. Forget about that. You're just here having fun, playing a make believe game with some friends. So you don't need this epic.
Mm.
Yeah, your player's not there. He's not there. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. It's a huge load off your hands.
Yeah. So
I
that
like.
that was great advice.
Hmm.
Mm.
Did you look at the utilizing the rotating dungeon master? I don't know if you necessarily
I've
have.
never done that. No, I
Yeah.
don't know how that would work. Have you done that before?
My group are all dungeon masters,
Yeah.
and we were actually talking about the rotation yesterday. And the rotation right now is I'll be running a game for the next three
Okay.
months, and then I'll run Super Atomic. And then I believe Cajun will then step in. He's planning to run, I think he said he's going to do 3 or 4 sessions. And I believe John has also done a lot of dungeon
So
mastering.
yeah, I understand what you're saying there. Like I do that as well. Like take turns running games. But what this mentions is a joint DM can also team up to run a session.
Yeah,
That's
I don't. I have done that before. I have. I
yeah.
don't normally do that in a Zoom call because it's too complicated. It's too difficult to manage. At a table, it can work. There are ways of divvying up the tasks. Like they can often put out maps and run the combat for you, and you can deal with the other stuff while they're dealing with the crunchy bits or just finding the information. Or so it can be done. But yeah, I think the rotating dungeon master. When I saw that, I was thinking in terms of my own home group,
Yeah.
who Simon's run a game for the last 3 years and is well and truly spent, and he's like, I need a break, guys. It's
Mm.
time for you to step up. So I liked that way of thinking about it. But they kind of do look at it more in terms of
Yeah. What they say here
dungeon
is
master assistant, really.
Yeah, what they say here is joint DMs. Two or more DMs can share the creation of a single campaign, working together to maintain continuity from session to session, making sure that each DM adventures advance the larger story of the world and characters. That that sounds like more work to me, to be honest.
Well, no, it's not, because I've done it before, and you can do it. You know, and I think the thing that I cottoned on to more was the occasional breaks with multiple DMs, where
Yeah,
not just the idea of
yeah,
two dungeon masters running the same session, but you might run for an hour and a half, take a break, and then somebody else steps in, does the other hour and a half at the end after the break. But I was actually thinking more in terms of switching
limiting.
DMs from time to time. That first sentence, like mini game groups switch DMs from time to time, and I wouldn't say that many groups do this, but the successful groups do.
Yeah, you don't have to be a forever DM, is what you're
No,
saying. No,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I think I've taken that on board recently because since I've started doing this podcast, because I run two games now of D&D and this podcast, and I've just started a second project. Plus, working full time and being a
mm,
husband and dad. So I've actually asked one of my players would he be keen to take over one of my games. So I've got a bit more free time to do other things. So
mm,
yeah. You will find, unfortunately, it is a trap. Being a dungeon master can be a trap,
mm.
and the forever DM is a is a real thing.
And it shouldn't be a trap, you know. Um, I don't really. I almost feel like you're not really playing D&D
Mm.
unless you take on the whole experience, and you don't have to do a lot of it.
So
But
that's probably something that should have been mentioned in either the basics or running the game as DM burnout, maybe.
yeah, yeah. Maybe expanding that section a little bit more, because
Mm,
it's a really important factor for groups for their survival, and it
mm,
also concretes friendship. If you're just playing with strangers who really the only time you actually interact is D&D, or you don't have any sort of you play with them because you want to play D&D, but you hate each other's guts, it's not a good sign. You know what I mean? And I find that once you experience lots of different ways of dungeon mastering, that happens in a group when you can do that with other people. Did you notice that there was a lot less information on ability scores or abilities compared to 2014? They had quite big write-ups in
mm.
2014. It's very, very small this time around.
To be honest, that whole ability checks, attack roll, saving throws, difficulty casters, and so on, I didn't really read it because
Mm.
I feel like
Just-
I know that stuff to death, and
yeah,
we had limited time, and I was wanting to dive more into
yeah,
different aspects of this book. I
yeah,
kind of looked at it and went, I
yeah.
know how to do this already, so I'm probably not going to read that.
It's the usual stuff, but I did notice that there was less information on abilities, and setting a difficulty class for a D20 test is very limited.
Mm,
There's no real examples of ranges offered.
yeah,
You don't have to give them a specific number, but I think for a new dungeon master, the likes of yourself and me who are a bit more experienced, we can come up with numbers based off the 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 system that they've put in place
yeah,
for 5e, um, or maybe in this case 6e. Degrees of success at a cost in terms of a dice mechanic was explained, and they don't really give enough examples of how to use degrees of success and success at a cost as a dice mechanic. I
yeah.
like the idea that they've included it, but they probably didn't go into enough detail for you to be able to understand how to use it.
I
Yeah.
think one thing I would have liked to have seen in here is how to deal with power gamers.
Mm.
So something I regularly see is gamers are smart and they'll build their characters to have ridiculously high AC, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, none of your monsters are doing damage. I would have liked to have seen some advice on that,
Mm.
because there is a way around that, and that's only something that comes from being an experienced dungeon master.
Or
Is
having
how
a yeah.
so that I would have liked that to have been mentioned because I, that is a major bugbear for a lot of new DMs. Like,
Yeah,
how do I hit this guy? All my monsters are doing nothing. I have to roll
a
above an
20.
18. Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah, have to roll 20.
I think even more with this new player's handbook, it's going to possibly be even more of a problem than before.
Yeah, most classes can get advantage on pretty much every single attack, and most of the classes are probably going to wind up with more hit points because they'll be temporary hit points, and yeah, they're doing more damage, and so yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I don't know what to say other than my whole group, apart from one individual in my group, are all optimizers and power gamers.
Mm,
So I have had to learn the hard way. I'm just thankful that they're older power gamers and optimizers, so they're a little bit more chill than they were
yeah,
before when they were younger.
mine are.
Um,
Yeah, I've got my younger group is video game
yeah,
focused,
mm,
so they are optimizers, whereas the other group I play with, which are more around our age, they're more into role playing and story. So
yeah.
I get the best of both worlds.
Mm,
I did like improvising. That's a great thing. Tips for thinking on your feet when the game deviates. That is a very important tool. I'd like to see a bit more on that. And also, I'm glad to see milestone was mentioned because I was a bit concerned that it wasn't mentioned at all
mm,
in the player's handbook. I was thinking, Jesus, if they remove that. And they've also included some other methods of leveling up as well: session-based leveling, story-based leveling.
mhm.
So
Yeah.
um,
And
yeah,
and actually, I'll be using session-based leveling and adventure-based leveling, which is basically the end of every session you level up. And the benefit of doing that is, one, you can experience all the different levels of play much faster. And if you're doing adventure-based leveling, it's basically at the end of the adventure. There's no point in asking, did we level up? Do we have enough experience points? You don't have to calculate it. When you finish
mm,
the adventure, you level up. So I'm using those two methods in conjunction, and I've
yeah,
explained it to my players, so I don't have to worry about John saying, "Did we level up today?" You already know the answer, John. I've told you how it works.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Did you
Uh,
did you see that the social interaction section it's really not enough? It's very small. I
yeah.
wasn't terribly pleased.
Things I noticed that were missing was like diseases, poisons, madness that
Yeah,
were in the 2014.
yeah, yeah. That's true.
What did you think of is the chasers in this one? Is it in this one?
The chasers, I think, is in the next chapter. We'll
Next
get to the
chapter.
chasers. Yeah.
Oh yes, the next chapter. It was so Chasers wasn't running the game. I'm sorry, I'm just glancing over the 2014
Mm,
running the game and seeing
yeah.
anything there that was missing that they hadn't covered before.
Well, while you're looking through that, I'm going to say the guidance on exploration is actually quite detailed. There's actually quite a lot of pages put into it. There's a lot of information provided, but it doesn't always have everything you would need, which is kind of a shock. And I guess they didn't talk about the hex crawl. They didn't talk about certain ways of dealing with exploration that sometimes will either have a narrative process or have a, what do you call it, a mechanical way of approaching something, but it's simplified so that you can deal with it very quickly and efficiently,
Yeah,
uh, rather than creating your own system to put in place for exploration, which a lot of dungeon masters who have been playing the game for a while wind up doing, unless they're
yeah,
using older systems.
yeah.
Um,
That's a great point, especially travel, long travel.
yeah,
Um, you know, for example, in Lost Mine of Phandelver, after you rescue Gundren, spoilers for this adventure, after you rescue Gundren from Cragmore Castle and head back to Phandalin, there's no guidance on anything that happens on that journey back, like how to run that. And you touched on that briefly. I was watching your Tyranny of Dragons video today, just for other reasons.
oh,
Um,
are
yeah,
we there yet?
yeah. There's a just like you did such a good point there. Like, just ignore this chapter, just do it as a monologue, and that should be some advice. Like,
Hmm.
um, if you're running an adventure where the players have to get from A to B, they should have given you some options there. Like, you can do it this way, you can roll encounters, to make it more fun, or you could just do it as a monologue.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you're right, because a monologue and just a narrative to speed it up.
mm,
Sometimes travel does not need to be a major part of the game.
mm,
You know what I mean? It's all right to go from A to B and narrative, just like you said. And then
yep.
sometimes I think they did include a steps of travel in the book somewhere. Um, Maybe it's in this chapter where you have like you can break up your travel into different steps, and at each step there's an event that takes place that's part of that travel that you can interact with to make travel a bit more interesting. But yeah, and I don't think when I was looking through here, there's not a lot of random encounter stuff. I think it may have been mentioned.
Mm,
There's no tables, random encounter tables, and I'm going to say right now, please do not put random encounter tables into a Dungeon Master Guide. They need to be specific to your adventure. There is no point putting them in there, whether it's wandering monster tables to stop them from resting in dangerous places or random encounter tables. We do not need random combat encounter tables in a book.
mm,
You can make that stuff yourself. It's not that
yep.
hard. And you do not need random encounter tables
That's
unless they are things that are non-combat.
yep.
We're having a table of different things. They might, oh, I came across somebody had a broken cart, or we found a body on the road, or I don't know, we found a tree that had fallen across. I mean, they might be random encounters, but random encounters, the problem with random encounters, they are misnamed. They're called random encounters, but they're not random actually. They're actually
Mm,
designed for an adventure. And
mm.
you can't put a generic thing into a Dungeon Master Guide for that.
So I run random encounters on travel, but they're not random. I just
No.
pretend. I just pretend they are. I sow little seeds into the game of just to make the world feel more alive, that it is
Mm.
connected. So they not necessarily have any major effect over the overall arcing story, but they're there on purpose.
Yeah. And you,
And
I
I can
bet you
take them
don't
away.
use just combat, right? You don't just
No,
use combat.
no,
Yeah.
and they're there for filler. I use them for filler. So uh, when I have a session, I always have a start point and an end point, and these encounters are just there. I call them DM fluff. They're just there. If my guys are motoring through what I've got prepared,
Hmm.
then they're just there. And if I don't
Slow
need
them
them,
down.
if I don't need them, I don't use them, and
Yeah.
I'll use them some. They never go to waste.
Yeah. And that there, I mean, when you say fluff, I imagine people were thinking, oh, fluff means they're pointless and useless and have no purpose outside of slowing the players down so that you've got, material for later on during your session. That's actually not true. It's not what
Mm,
you're necessarily saying, because one of the things about random encounters or encounters that are set up for an adventure that you can place wherever you need them to be is they are a great testing ground for character development. You can test and see how the players are going to run their character. They build and develop characters as much as anything else in a game.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, for example, like I had when the players were camping, I had the sound of orc war drums in the distance. Now they could have gone and investigated these orcs and dealt with them. They decided to ignore it because they had low HP and they just wanted to rest, and then the next day they left.
Mm,
So that means in my game, these orcs can come back and do something bad, and there is a little bit of responsibility there because hey, you guys didn't deal, you guys didn't deal with these guys, and now they're gonna, if you dealt with them, this might not have happened.
mm,
Like you say, it's not fluff, and it didn't matter. It did not affect the game. It had nothing to do with the main story. It was just a bunch of yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, we better motor through because
So,
we're almost an
did,
hour through. So, any final
yeah,
thoughts on chapter 2?
yeah. There's really, I would say, reasonable advice on adjusting and designing your own combat encounters. Like this just the general guidance and advice they give you for creating your own combat encounters is actually pretty solid.
Mm.
I'm thank God that Wizards of the Coast ditched the Adventuring Day guidelines.
Yeah.
Where you had to have a certain number of fights in a day. It was always a nonsense. It never existed before Wizards of the Coast got D&D, and it should have always have been. And the problem is there's a few people within our community who think that you must have that kind of guideline. It's an impossible guideline to meet. It's a waste of your time because very few people use it. It doesn't work. The design team never used the adventuring day anyway. And I'm sure there's somebody out there who will say, yes, I use the adventuring day and it does work. You
That's
are one
fine.
of the very few people who have ever been able to get it to deciding well work, okay? It only works for a tiny fraction of the community and not for everybody else. And it also sets up your adventure design for a very particular one, which is what the running fight, basically. You have to have a running fight so you can't rest before. and when you design that way, it's a pain in the ass. Most of the variant rules also are gone. And I think we're going to be talking about this probably in the DM's toolbox.
Which is next chapter.
Yeah. And to be fair, the DM's toolbox, variant rules, a lot of the stuff is gone. I think it's fine because most of the pros and cons for those variant rules were never included anyway, and most likely were never tested. And I think that's what Chris Perkins was alluding to with the DM's toolbox, is we removed a lot of variant rules, optional rules, that we knew we had no idea what the effect would be on the game was.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think running the game chapter, it just shows you how to blend core mechanics with improvisation while maintaining a flow is my thoughts. But yeah, chapter 3, let's get into chapter 3 or we'll run out of time. Okay, DM's toolbox. So this one covers alignment, chases, creating a background, creating a creature, creating a magic item, creating a spell, curses and magical connotations, death, doors, dungeons, environmental effects, fear and mental stress, firearms and explosives, gods and other powers, hazards, marks of the prestige, mobs, non-player characters, poison, renown, settlements, siege equipment, supernatural gifts, and traps. This is a big toolbox.
It is a big section, and it's probably the section that a dungeon master will use the most in terms of beginner and experienced. If an experienced dungeon master decides to buy this, which frankly I don't think they should, but this is the main area for sure. Alignment is explained as a descriptor, not as an enforcer, which older books had done actually, but it's now back. They've allowed, this is how alignment works, but alignment doesn't, straitjacket the character or even the monsters. I always felt like alignment was more of a tool that was useful for a dungeon master and their monsters, rather than having to have a sentence describing the personality of our monster. You could have one or two, one word alignment, and combo alignments were always a pain in the ass because that would always just cause fights.
Yeah, I miss the old pick me, lawful, neutral, chaotic.
Yeah, it's just, you pick one. It's not chaotic neutral or lawful good, or, you pick one. Yeah, that's it.
It covers a lot.
The chase mechanics are the same, and they're still not very good.
No.
They do try. They really do try, but the chase mechanics are either too complicated for some people or too easy for some people. I don't think that Wizards of the Coast can win on chase mechanics. Do I think they could have done it better? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
I think, word here. Skill challenges should have come back.
Yeah, and you need to give them the advanced skill challenges, not the early skill challenges. People keep trying to teach 4E skill challenges, and 4E skill challenges when they first came out were shit, and they still are, and they need significant amendment, and they did all those amendments, but they never wrote them into a book. They just told people over social media, and some of it is in the second Dungeon Master Guide for 4E, and that would solve a lot of their problems.
Yeah. I like the background advice because I was a little bit put off by the background choices. So I do like that the dungeon master can create their own custom backgrounds to suit their campaigns. That's really cool. I'm hoping that, because a lot of my newer, younger players use D&D Beyond to create their characters. So I'm hoping that is a feature that you can make custom backgrounds, and that your players can access those through Beyond.
Yeah.
That would be great. Otherwise, because none of my players will I'm not going to even bother to try and make them roll up a physical character sheet. Mobs, I really liked that section. Yeah, that was a really good way of handling large groups of monsters. There's something I thought was really cool.
Yeah, so that's what it always was in the first Dungeon Master Guide of 2014, and yeah, the problem with the custom backgrounds is they've made them an optimization thing, and
Yes.
really the customization of backgrounds. I think if anything, they should have just got rid of all their examples and had one example and given them the customization backgrounds in the player's handbook. And as you've probably you've said to me, they should have ditched tying ability score increases to the background. Fuck, just don't do that. And
Yeah.
I honestly think the feats, just drop the feats. If you're going to have feats at level 1, just make it a very real optional rule in the Dungeon Master Guide and just leave it there. And just stick with the equipment and the skills and the tool proficiencies and maybe a language, or and that sort of stuff. Otherwise it just becomes another thing that you want to have to optimize to.
Yeah, it should be a background should be a role playing tool, not a optimization tool.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
yeah, me too.
Yeah. You shouldn't. You're a farmer because you want to be a farmer, not because you want this one particular feat that farmer background gives you, and then it makes no sense to your character.
Did you notice that the monster building rules or guides are basically just reskin a monster?
Yes.
And 2014 had extensive detail on how to do that, and it wasn't. Not all of it was very good. Let's get real. If you look at it, most of it was mechanical. It wasn't lore based, and neither book has ever done lore based. And everybody's sort of hoping that the monster manual for 2025 will have how to build a monster, because right now we don't have anything like that. And the argument can be made is they still haven't probably sorted out the mathematics for it. It was probably still in development when the Dungeon Master Guide was locked in for printing, so they probably couldn't include it there. But there's always that fear that it won't go into the monster manual, and we will just have to buy whatever gets published. And there's no guidance for how to make your own stuff, and it's a big thing for DMs. Do you make your own monsters?
No, I use yours, so that's why I pay a patron.
Okay. And I make a lot. I make a lot of
Yeah,
monsters. Yeah, I make one every single week. So
free plug for Fred's Patreon.
Yeah, exactly. And every YouTuber I know makes shitloads of monsters. So yeah,
it's not something I enjoy doing. It's like they say, there's different types of DMs, and some DMs love different aspects of the game. Creating monsters is not my cup of tea. I'll have an idea of, I want this. Classic example: Black Spider and Lost Mine of Fandalva should be a Drider. Someone has made that. I know Fred has made that.
Yep.
There is on D&D Beyond. You can go into a little section where people have created their monsters. A lot of those are broken.
Yeah.
Yes, but you can. Yeah, I find other people have done the work for me. So I do use a lot of homebrew monsters, but not my own. It's not something I want to. We've got limited prep time, and that's just not something that's on my prep list.
Consuming.
Yeah,
really time consuming to do your own monsters. And the creature traits section is rather small compared to 2014. I think there's less information on creature traits or special abilities compared to 2014 if you want to make your own stuff. When I looked at the homebrew magic item section, it's basically the same as 2014, just better organized. They put everything in the same place rather than scattering it throughout the book, which last time was really a pain in the ass to find everything. But they put it all in the same place this time, which is good change. Yeah,
it's a lot more expansive than the 2014 Dungeon Master Workshop, which only had, I think they had ability options, adventuring options, combat options, creating a monster, creating a spell, creating a magic item, creating new character options. So you're getting a lot more. Good news, Wally's still got a job.
Yes,
there's nothing about puzzles here.
It's funny. I was talking to Wally about that on Friday, and he said, "I'm glad that they didn't even try to do anything with it
Yeah.
because he said
He has.
everybody they've got to do puzzles in their
Yep.
published adventures,
Yep.
they have not been very good.
So
And
yeah.
do you know what's funny though? When I look at the puzzle section, they got Deborah Ann Woll. Deborah
Oh
Ann
yeah.
Woll, she's the puzzle queen, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
if you want to get any advice from somebody about how to make puzzles for your game, you
Yeah.
ask Wally DM or you ask Deborah Ann Woll because she's really good at it.
Mm.
Uh, and they had her look through this book apparently, and no, nothing, nothing.
So yeah, that's a particular niche of
Yeah.
DMing that Wally has still got the corner on. Yeah,
Yep.
he's yeah,
Yep.
yep.
Yep. Yep.
Glad. So good. Traps. What did you think of the trap section?
I think the trap section is not
Yeah,
great. Look, the trap section is expanded, so they expanded on each trap type, gives you like additional mechanics for different levels of play. Okay, and so you can use it for whatever level of play you are wanting. Doesn't matter what the character level is, it'll work. They did remove the sphere of annihilation, but if you look at the trap section that they have here and you compare it to old DMs, Dungeon Master guides, there's about a third or half of what there used to be.
yeah,
Like there just isn't that many there. So they really haven't focused on it. I suspect this is more a product of traps being really unpopular in modern D&D, and because a lot of
yeah.
players hate on them so much, that they have decided that they don't want to see them, and so they probably haven't focused that much on them.
So as a dungeon master that has recently run both the Tomb of Horrors and the Sunless Citadel, I want to say that traps are a great team building exercise. No,
Yeah, if you
nothing will make your party get together than trying to figure out how to get a player out of a 20-foot hole in the ground.
Yeah, well, but the truth is too is that traps, if they have a winding clock and they ramp up, and there's time for you, you get hit the first time with it, and it keeps going and doing something. There's a chance to escape the trap,
Yeah,
and breaking down traps into finding it, but not necessarily with a dice roll. They didn't really go into that, and disabling, jamming, avoiding, all the different approaches for dealing with a trap. You don't have to just always activate it or trigger it
yeah,
or disarm it. There are a lot of other approaches you can go around it. They didn't really go into any of that sort of stuff. I think
yeah,
they have tried to do a better job. It's certainly a
yeah.
better job in a lot of respects, but they really haven't done enough to sort of, make it a thing.
One of my favorite pieces of art is in this section, which is under the firearms and explosives,
Mm-hmm.
where we've got a dwarf using a shotgun against a troll. I think that's just awesome. It's so bad. This is my type of art. This is not cutesy at all. This is
Yeah. Yeah, this is
bad art.
adult art. This is the sort of stuff that the teenagers and the kids actually want,
Yeah,
believe it or not.
yeah. I just thought that is probably my favorite image
Mm,
piece of art I've seen in this whole Dungeon Master Guide so far. Yeah, the trap section very underwhelming. If
mm.
you want a really good trap section, I would recommend the Dungeon Master Guide 2 from 4th edition.
Yeah.
Really creative traps in that.
Yeah.
But this is stuff that this is what the DM's Guild is for as well.
But also too, if you look at the trap section, I think what they've done is they've expanded out the hazards section quite a lot. And so hazards and traps are very similar in many respects. One is not manufactured, and the other one is manufactured. Traps are manufactured, hazards are not manufactured. They are naturally forming things. So I think that's probably where their head was when they were designing that section.
Yeah. No
Making your
mention
own. Sorry.
no mention of madness.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't think that the mechanics for madness in 2014 or any form of madness mechanic is something that is very useful. I know there are people who want that, but I always felt like that sort of smashes a player's ability to play their character by forcing that sort of thing. And I used to just use a wisdom check or a wisdom saving throw, either one of those dice mechanics,
Yeah.
and then set a number to determine things that would force their character to do things they wouldn't normally want to do with it. It's
yeah.
really all it needed to be.
It's a mechanic that's tied to a particular tone of adventure. So
It is.
it suits something like Curse of Strahd
Yeah,
or Dungeon of the Mad Mage.
yeah. Or
So
Journey to the Forgotten Realms. It's not the Forgotten Realm, to the Far Realm.
mm,
Where
yeah,
you're going to an alien world.
mm.
Making your own spells is not that detailed.
No,
It
no.
it it's
All the
it's probably
customization stuff is
yeah,
very bare boned
yeah,
and basic.
yeah,
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 sorry.
yeah. Basically, it says just copy what you see in the player's handbook, and most of the advice I think around that was it's
Saying that
not
though, I still think it's sound advice.
it is
It,
sound advice, but yeah, it's just enough to get barely by, but it probably isn't quite enough to get you all the way there. Um, it's
mm,
like when you look at you look at all of the things that require you to do any home brewing. I think they've assumed that a beginner dungeon master is not going to need any tools for home brewing, and
okay,
so that's why there's so little there.
okay.
Yeah.
Let's move on. We're hour in and
Curses, did you
halfway.
look? The curses stuff is actually pretty decent information. I was actually quite impressed. They had spells, creatures, magic items, narrative curses, environmental curses, demonic possession. I was
Okay.
not expecting that. I thought they would be quite light on that. Even the
Yeah.
magic contagions, even though they've got no diseases, they have at least provided 3 examples of a magical contagion, which is basically a disease, right? That's
Okay.
just magical. Um,
Does it tell you how to deal with cursed magic items, or is that a bit later?
it does have some advice around that. Yes, it has a couple of different ways you can approach curses and how to deal with curses. So there is some stuff there, and I think
Okay.
that's reasonable. They talk about the death of a character. That's covered quite well.
Yeah.
I counted up. They had 6 different approaches.
This is fifth edition. How often that's gonna?
Well, that's true. That's true. But at least they have covered that topic. If a character
Oh yeah.
dies or if the whole party dies, they've actually discussed it this time, which they did not have before.
Don't make it. Oh yeah. Don't cheat in the monster's favor. Don't make it personal. Provide fair warning.
Mm.
Fair encounter. Yeah, I almost killed a player on Friday night.
No, you
Um,
didn't. You mean their character, not their player, because that would be
no.
illegal.
Sorry. Yeah, their character. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you notice there's a lot more information on doors? Doors was in the old DMG, but
mm,
they now have types, locks, secrets, portcullises. They did actually spend a bit of time talking
yeah.
about how to deal with doors, which I was highly amused.
That is really good though, because as a person that has just recently run a lot of dungeons, I have a lot of conversations about doors for some reason.
Yeah, it's weird, eh? It's like a major thing. Like your
Yeah,
encounter could be just a series of doors.
yeah.
Um, The Dungeon Quirks table is quite nice. I looked at the Dungeon Quirks table. It's nice, and the breakdown of different areas and dungeons is welcome. Unfortunately, all of that dungeon generating tables, they're all been removed. They're gone. They ditched all of that.
Did anyone use those?
I do. I use the back pages, but I don't use them to generate and create a dungeon. What I do is I use them to determine the kind of areas I would like within a location, a dungeon being
Okay,
anything from a temple to a castle or a crypt or something like that. And they had
okay.
broken that all down, so that was actually quite useful. I use that a lot,
I
believe it or not.
saw. I think Ryan from Verdigris Table made a video on, and he made a dungeon using it. I think that's the only time I've ever seen anyone use it.
Yeah, as a tool, because it also included things like what you can smell, what you can hear, what you would find in a room. There's a whole lot of list of things that you can populate your
Yeah.
rooms with if you're getting stuck. But then I
Is
make
it?
a lot of my own stuff, right? And you don't usually do a lot of homebrew adventure stuff, and I do now. So
Yeah. Um. Is the 5 room dungeon? Is that a copyrighted thing? Is that not something they could have included?
I don't think it is a copyright thing. I mean, it may be have been brought up by somebody in the past and suggested as a thing. I don't really think it would have been a problem to have included it, but they didn't
Hmm.
include it.
No, that would have been that's a very handy mechanic for
Hmm.
just for prepping a session.
Yeah.
Uh,
Did
yeah.
you see also environmental effects? Looks like they've shortened it down because they used to be in Tasha's guide, I believe, and they
Mm,
did include it in this book, the environmental effects, which I think is why their trap section is not expanded, because they had the environmental effects.
Yeah. No, there's some. All in all, it's a practical toolbox. It's got a lot of really good topics in it. Yeah. I would. Yeah. Like you say, I would have liked to seen a bit more on the traps and complex NPCs. And yeah, I immediately noticed the lack of puzzles.
Mm.
But I am kind of glad that isn't there because, yeah,
Leave it
Wally.
to the experts, because Wizards of the Coast doesn't have anybody who can do that right now.
Yeah. So
Um,
Wally DM. He is the puzzle guy. Check out his YouTube channel. Buy his books.
mm.
He is the guy.
Yeah, what I would have liked to have seen in this section is homebrewing your own classes, subclasses, species and races, feats, and yeah, those are the things that were kind of missing from there. That's all I have to say about that one.
Okay, let's go. Chapter 4.
Yeah.
Creating adventures. Step-by-step adventures. Lay out the premise. Draw in the players. Plan encounters. Social interaction encounters. Exploration encounters. Combat encounters. Bringing it to the end. Adventure rewards. And then we got 5 adventure examples.
Yeah.
This is a solid chapter as well.
Now, they've done a better job. A much better job of explaining and offering tools to make your own adventures in this Dungeon Master Guide. The 4-step adventure creation process doesn't resemble Chris Perkins' one-page format. They've left out NPCs, they've left out the map, they've left out location details, and I noticed that some of the examples do include a breakdown of NPCs. Only one of them does. I think the last one for high level play, and I think there's one sentence in there about location stuff. There's really no talk about maps, which are often really useful as a visual aid when you're designing an adventure. Whether you draw it yourself or you copy something, you just steal somebody else's or borrow somebody else's. I thought that was weird. I was wondering if maybe is this James Wyatt's system rather than Chris Perkins' system? Chris Perkins' system is really good. Like, if you go your adventure hook or recap, list your characters so you know who they are, so you remember what to call them and not, hi Bob, what is your character going to do? That can be quite useful to focus on having a list of that. The NPCs, locations, and then a breakdown of encounters. And then, of course, at the bottom, you really should have rewards. What do they get for doing the stuff in the adventure? Like, what's the payoff?
Did you like the random tables in here?
So, yeah, I did actually. There's a lot of them.
I thought they were really cool.
I really liked the adventure situation by level or tier. It's very good. It explains what a character at that level is probably supposed to be doing. At low level, these are the sorts of difficulties and problems you deal with. Your small level stuff, and you keep going on up the different tiers. Provides reasonable tables of adventure ideas. Some of the adventure ideas are kind of a bit nebulous. They kind of fall out of the category. But I did also notice that tier 1 and tier 2 aren't as clearly explained as I would like. Tier 3 and 4 are really well explained. You know what you're dealing with there. Tier 1 and 2 feel a little bit, just in their first description, it's not completely obvious. And I think 2014 did it better.
I would use these
the tables are still great.
I could see myself using these tables for one shots or just coming up with an idea. I thought they were really cool. I really did like the mention of bringing an adventure to the end.
Yes.
I thought that is, when to tie up your adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Really good advice. Really good advice. It's short.
It is. They gave you a table of 10 different adventure climbers as suggestions to a dungeon master for wrapping things up. Which is really, really good advice. That's very actionable stuff. And they give you a sort of a, when do you think you should bring it to a conclusion? That's useful stuff as well. Did you see that the map section was pretty bad in 2014 for adventures?
Mm.
And in this book, it's still very primitive, but at least this time they provide you with a map symbol legend so
Yep.
that you know what that when you're drawing your map and you want to use symbolization,
Yeah.
you can see how you might draw them if you want to
So
draw it.
it's Dyson Logos, isn't it? He does all the maps for this one.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But yeah, there's usually some very conventional
I know
symbols that you use, right?
a lot of VTT players aren't a fan of Dyson Logos maps because they don't really look great on a VTT. So
Yeah,
I don't have. I like them. I
yeah.
really do like Dyson Logos maps. They're old school. They're easy to read.
They're easy to copy. So as you're
Yep.
drawing it out, you can just lay a
Yep.
piece of paper over it and you can draw over the section you need them to see, and you don't have to draw the rest if you're not using a virtual tabletop and you're doing it in person or something like that.
Mm.
I do this even when I'm on a Zoom call. I will draw out part of the map if I can see it on a piece of paper, drop it in front of them. We use my second webcam, and they go, "Oh, I know where we are." I don't have to worry about using a virtual tabletop or setting all that shit up. So it's always nice.
Yeah.
Did you
Just
notice? Sorry.
sorry. There you go.
Did you notice there are 3 different types of adventure hook tables that they're
Yep.
actually quite all right. They're only a D6. One is called for patrons, giving you a hook. One for supernatural hooks. One for happenstance hooks. I think that was a good addition.
So these tables are good. Like, not to sort of promote AI or whatever, but these tables are good for using AI to expand upon. Like, you could chuck something like this in ChatGPT and say, "Hey, make me more tables like this,"
Yeah,
and it will spit something similar. So just having that basics in there, yeah, really cool, really cool. Yeah, this is what more DM prep should be like,
yeah,
or
exactly.
inspiration. Yeah,
And
so
giving you a list of possible things you can do really stops that writer's block or that brain block as you're
yeah,
trying to come up with your own stuff, right? They
yeah,
they even included character objectives. A really sensible idea so that the players can personalize their goals within the adventure. There's even, like a list of different things you can do
yeah.
there as well.
Plan to count us. Okay, so let's get into the adventure examples. What did you think?
Um, unfortunately, I don't think the examples. I like the fact that they have gone with 1 page or less. I think the formatting for it is written for a dungeon master to run their own game rather than have it be a published adventure. I think that's an
Mhm.
awesome thing to do, but
Yeah.
it's not quite enough to be useful. I think there are things that are missing that it needed to have, and they're unfortunately not there.
Mm. This is um, this is one of the tracking sheets I think they should have included. Uh, uh, this one-page adventure like thing that you can fill out.
Yeah.
Uh,
What I would have liked to have done is to have used Chris Perkins' format and just laid out a tracking sheet like this, and you just one line for this, and you just work your way through. It's only 1 page. You fill it
mm,
out, and it breaks down all the major areas that you need to cover,
mm.
and you can do that in half an hour. I
What's
suspect.
good is, yeah, it shows you that you don't have to write War and Peace to run a session.
Yeah.
You just need a situation, a hook, some encounters, and yeah, and you're good to go. Uh,
Did
I don't. Yeah, some of these seem a bit weaker than the others.
Yeah. But I feel like you would still have to do a little bit of work with some of these to make it
Mm,
to pull it off. Um, but at least they're not trying to show you how to write a 7 page or 30 page adventure. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Which I feel a lot. That's something I know you give a lot of advice on. People get overworked and over concerned about writing this thing so it looks exactly like a published event. No one else is going to read it. Don't worry
Yeah.
about it. As long as you understand it.
Yeah.
That's where I do a lot of that myself. With I'll copy and paste the map I'm using and then just put a key, and I'll just have a couple of words that possibly to anyone else but me won't make sense. But to me, it's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
that room's got this guy and this guy's got a lisp. Um, yeah, just enough sort of keywords that you can run this encounter without having to sit down and flip through a book and read an entire paragraph. So yeah,
It,
they're a bit hit and miss.
it is a bit hit and miss, but I mean, it's funny how you say that because I remember how for years I was saying, look, go with a map, 1-page breakdown of what's in the map, and that's it. And then you did it, and I'd been just talking about it, and then
Mhm.
then I wound up like now every week I actually do it.
Yep.
So, and we spend about 2 hours, and we do an entire adventure, and we might not get everything done, but we get enough done to be able to pull it off.
Yeah.
So
If you look behind my DM screen when I'm running a game, I have one page tapped to the DM screen, which is the entire adventure, which is pretty much just a map and
yeah,
a bunch of a bunch of
key
encounters.
locations. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I don't use anything else. I just use the books when needed.
Mm.
And
So
I've run some big dungeons now doing that. So yeah,
yeah,
it works.
they
Uh,
talk about pacing and tension and urgency and rests. All of that's good advice in there. They even included a monster behavior, combat tactics, guidance around that. That's a really welcome addition,
mm,
and it's generic enough, so it's not necessarily tied to specific monsters. So you can actually use it for all of your monsters. You just have to decide which ones. They even have troubleshooting advice,
mm,
which is excellent for combat counter building. Like some things you might run into. So how do you avoid those problems? They actually address that, and um, I
managing rewards as well as mentioned.
yes, yeah, they had.
Yeah.
Then they have a pretty solid section on. Well, no, it's not. It's when I say solid, actually, it's super simplified for individual and horde treasure.
Mm,
Like it's much, much less. And you might feel like you're being robbed, but I actually think it's perfectly fine.
mm,
It does the job. It's perfectly all right. It was all right for them to streamline that a lot more than it was before, because I was to always see like, oh, hang on, I'm rolling on a percentile dice. There's various things I could wind up rolling up, but
yeah.
really all I want to know is at level 1 to 4, how much gold should I be giving out for an individual treasure
Yeah.
parcel? And when I get to a treasure hoard, how much do I just tell me what it is? Give me
Mm,
one number. Don't give me a couple of different numbers. Breaking it up into how many copper coins, electrum, all that. It's just not
yeah.
necessary.
Yeah. Just give the DM less math. What did you think of the XP budget system for creating encounters?
Oh, I think the XP budget system is simpler. I think
Yeah.
it needed to be simpler because it was too complicated, even for those of us who like the mathematics. It's taken from Dungeons and Dragons 4E, for those of you who are wondering, and XP budgets are not a new thing. It's been around a long time. It's still modified from the 2014 encounter building budget system that they had, but they've got rid of the multiplier. I doubt that this is accurate. I doubt that it's worthwhile worrying about,
Mm,
um, as it never really worked in 4E, and it's never really worked full stop. It's just there's too many factors that come into play that can affect how combat plays out for your group, your skill level, dice rolls. It's probably never been fully tested either because the monsters aren't locked down yet. The problem is that there's a big part of the community that insists that you break down combat into mathematics and formulas that always work. And I don't think it's fair to expect that. So, I think Wizards of the Coast put it there because they knew there was somebody who would expect it. Hopefully, it's better than it was before.
yeah.
But I also think it is a complete waste of most people's time, and they just need to use the warm up the frog technique, which is you start small and you just keep increasing difficulty until you figure out what your group can handle. And then when they
Well,
change level, then you do it all over again.
this is how I balance encounters. I just grab a handful of miniatures and go,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's more art and trial by error rather than a scientific
Yeah, should be right.
mathematical formula. Yeah.
Or they just give them a few more hit points or a few less hit points.
Mm.
Depends how it goes.
Did you
Uh,
did you have a look at the the combat encounter feature challenges that were discussed, like different elevations, defensive positions, hazards, mixing up monster groups, and
yeah.
threats that force movement? I think that was fairly solid advice, particularly for high level games where combat is usually the least interesting part of the game at high level,
Mm,
past level 10. Um, I thought it was
yeah.
reasonable advice.
So things I like, I think the random tables were great. I think the random tables are my favourite part of this section.
Hmm.
Things I thought were missing. I would have liked to have seen a tracking sheet for the one-page adventure. I think that would have been a cool
Yeah.
thing to add. And I didn't see any sort of guideline on encounter frequency at all.
So somebody mentioned that, and I think that's all. That's a bullshit thing to worry about. I know a lot of people want that.
Mm,
Again, it's looking at encounter building for combat as a mathematical equation and a thing that can always work. It's never been. It's back to the adventuring day, and I think it's smart to ignore that, because as soon as I established that, how how many battles a group can have is not determined by the game mechanics, the dungeon master, that is always controlled by the players. And as long as you allow your players to control that frequency, they will.
yeah.
And I've always gone with, always assume the players will rest after every battle, because that is the most sensible thing to do.
Mm.
Um, and yeah,
I can
and
see if I'm losing the table or then it's time to change the encounter
yeah,
as well. Read the room is a
yeah,
good.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
all right, we're going to run out of time. We probably might not get this whole book done. Shall we
Uh,
move on? Any final thoughts
no, I've seen
on that one?
everything. Yeah.
Right, chapter 5: creating campaigns, step-by-step campaigns. Your campaign journal, campaign premise, campaign characters, campaign conflicts, flavors of fantasy, campaign settings, campaign start, plan adventures, ending a campaign, and then a whole section on Greyhawk.
Mm.
Okay.
I didn't always agree. Look, having steps to design a campaign is good. I don't agree with all of the over planning. There's a lot of over planning that takes place with the campaign. It's very hard to plan out everything in a campaign and think it's going to follow that order. It just doesn't work. And ending a campaign, you can have a basic idea how you want to end it, but you don't get locked into it because it's not really that useful.
Yeah.
I think they talk about the journal and keeping notes. Good advice. You should be doing that. Otherwise, you will forget stuff and make mistakes and then contradict yourself.
I
Um,
think it would have been it would have been nice to mention. I'm not sure if it was mentioned, and I might have missed it.
mm,
Other types of ways of running games apart from a campaign in here, which maybe
yeah,
doesn't make campaign sense, but episodic running an episodic game or running one shots or because
well, they cover episodic. They do talk about that.
oh, they do. Okay, I
Yeah.
might have skimmed
What
that part.
what they did leave out was this is more in the adventure section. They left out the discussion around event based adventures and location based adventures, because they're very different design for both of them.
Mm,
And you can have combinations. You can also have the linear adventure, right, which is again a different animal as well. And a lot of that information is not in any of the chapters.
yeah.
But they do discuss the different types of campaigns you can run
So this
with
this
short
is this
examples.
was in hindsight this was chapter 1 of the 2014
Yeah, yeah, wrong place. Wrong place.
yeah of the DMG. So it's good to see this in chapter 5.
Yeah.
Makes a lot more sense. Yeah, it does. I'm glad they just cover the basic styles of you got heroic fantasy, epic fantasy, mystery, horror. Uh, yeah, guides to publish settings,
Yeah, a
how
bit of
to
advertising on Wizards of the Coast part in
yeah,
that
well,
book.
well, it's their IP, of course they've got
Yeah,
to
it
sell
is.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that. Thoughts on Greyhawk?
Thoughts on Greyhawk? I think the majority. I guess when I was looking at this, I really
Sorry, just ask. Do you have any sort of affection or
no,
nostalgia
none at
for the
all.
setting? No,
No, and
same, same.
the problem is I don't have any affection for any of their campaign worlds. I don't give a shit about any of their worlds, and I think a lot of people make their own up quite often. There's
Oh,
probably a portion of people who use Wizard of the Coast stuff, but I always come down to I have to remember their stuff. I don't want to have to remember their stuff. Give me a
so
map, but
I
give
can't
me a
say.
map,
So I'm
sure.
the guy that wants to do a 2-hour episode on Dragonlance.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or if we had AJ here, he'd be going on about the Forgotten Realms and Faerun.
Yeah,
I'm just not sold on this stuff. So I guess for me, when I was looking at this, I like the fact that they have presented as an example Greyhawk.
Mm.
I just feel like the section may be a bit long. The 3 different conflicts that can take place in Greyhawk is outlined as examples, and how do you do it for different character levels? That is explained. It's done well. The
Yeah.
chromatic dragons, the elemental evil cultists, as Izu, and the followers. That's all good stuff. The majority of the Greyhawk setting is a good example until you get to the Gazetta. For
Mm.
this, for the the Gazetta section, and it's
Mm.
so broad. It's not enough to run the world.
Yeah.
So I feel like it should have just been in a separate book completely. The gods of
It's
Greyhawk don't include what it's got a table, which is great to have a table. Super simple. Okay, that table's wonderful until you look at it and think, oh, hang on, what is the god's motivation? What are they the god of? That is
mm.
completely left out. There's nothing there. It also includes Greyhawk um, as being sort of like you could do your thing this way. There's too much information here if you're making your own world. To use this as an example, do not build your world like Greyhawk, because this is written for publication and by somebody who had plenty of time to build it out. So I don't know. I feel like it's a blunder.
Yeah.
Um,
You just if you're going to build a world, start small and expand
start
outwards.
small, give them some really basic structure. I mean,
Yep.
I do world building every 2 months on
Yep.
my channel, and a lot of people do. And the advice, top down, bottom up, doesn't really matter. Use both. This book doesn't really do quite enough to get you where you need to be, and I feel like they
Oh,
probably included too much of Greyhawk, too much information, but not enough to make it worthwhile.
so I know I'm probably out of the three of us, I'm the only one that possibly is going to end up with the physical edition. So I am going to appreciate having another poster map. I
Oh
love a
yeah,
poster map, and I do find a poster map to inspires me so much. Just having a whole world there, and this over here and this over here, and that's why you got wikis and whatnot. So you do your own investigating. So I think that's a cool thing to add to the physical book. A poster map of a continent and a city. But
absolutely.
I
I
don't have
think
any desire to run any games in Greyhawk.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people will never use this section of the book, you know?
Mm.
If anything, I think the more
It's
useful
niche.
section,
It's very niche.
it's too niche. It's way too
Mm.
niche. I
Yeah.
think creating your own campaign with that 5-step process, it's
Yeah.
reasonable. It's not perfect. The name, the factions, magic, mysteries, landmark. Mysteries and landmarks are kind of the same. Deities.
Mm.
That's some of the stuff that you would do in terms of creating a campaign. But I feel like this is more, when we say campaign, we're talking more about world building.
Mm.
This feels more like world building. I actually think, if anything, I like the fact that they have included session 0. I think
Mm.
one of the more solid parts of the book is in this chapter is building characters together, connecting your characters together, starting locations, first adventure, plan out your adventures, not so important, and ending the campaign. Well, have some idea of what you want to end with, but it might not end there. Somebody might get bored and you just have to end. I think that's reasonably good stuff.
Mm. Mm.
Um,
Does it have advice in there about creating like a villain for your
No,
campaign?
and there was in the 2014, they did have some information on creating NPCs and villains. That is very sparse in terms of this book. I don't think you have anywhere near
Mm.
what you need to be able to deal with NPCs and creating villains.
Okay.
Um,
Right. Speaking of niche chapters, this is probably my least favorite chapter. The next one. Oh,
oh,
any
did you
final
did you
thoughts
see
on
the
that?
break section? There was having a break session, or like a one session where it's a break where you just do stuff with your bastions or your strongholds, have a
Oh, yeah,
carnival
yeah.
session, a comedy creature, find the missing pet, shopping. I don't think we need to be told too much about the shopping one because it happens to us too often. Special events and
That
vacations.
is something that should be mentioned though.
Yeah,
Is
yeah. I think that was
what players do with their gold, because that's something that you're giving players gold all the time, and then
mm,
what do I
yeah,
do with
yeah,
it?
exactly. Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Oh god.
Yeah. So, any final thoughts
No,
on
cosmology, let's
chapter?
deal with that. I've got very little to say about it, and unfortunately, it's probably not going to be
Same.
very
Yeah.
helpful.
Well, that's good because we're gonna run out of time. I think this is my least favorite
Uh,
chapter. So this one's the planes, planar travel, planar adventuring, tour of the multiverse. I think this is already in the player's handbook as well. They kind of double dipped here. Um, this chapter's not crucial for anyone. Or well, maybe, but not for all teams. If you're
no,
doing homebrew, if you're doing a homebrew, then you can ignore this chapter completely. It is something I feel didn't need to be in here.
yeah, uh,
I would have rather had chapter 6 planning a session
yeah. I
or
honestly,
prepping a session.
yeah, this is one of those. It's a funny thing because including official multiverse information here is a complete waste of time, space, because
Mm,
very few people will ever use it.
mm,
One, because sometimes you just want to start small, and multiverse is big, right?
mm,
And multiverse often means high level games. How many people
yeah.
run a high level game? I do, but many people do not. And even if you were to use this information, it's not enough information to have a multiverse. You need a whole book for that. You had to
Yeah.
have a book that's just that to really for it to be useful
This
to you.
is Dungeon Master Guide 2
Yeah, yeah.
information.
Well, it shouldn't even be Dungeon Master Guide 2. It should be multiverse world building. And
Yeah.
you have your multiverse, and you have explain how to build your own as well.
Right.
The planar adventure situations table is actually a good idea, okay? But it could have been larger. And a lot of ideas for places to have adventures in the Wizard of the Coast cosmology, the surface level only. They really don't go into depth. And the weird thing about this is it just feels like it's an intellectual property dump of
Yeah.
70 pages.
That's what it is. It is. Oh,
It's
is it 70 pages, this book? This
Or
part?
is it 70 pages? I think this is
Oh,
covering
sure.
multiverse, world building, and campaign stuff,
Mm.
things that, and the Greyhawk stuff as well. These are things that just intellectual property dumps. And
This is here for them to sell you more shit later down, further
yeah,
down the track, or
exactly. The weird thing is because I have multiverse campaigns. Usually we start doing that at about level 10. Okay. We'll start moving away from the world and going multiverse. We certainly will do that at about level 14 or 15 because that's kind of the normal thing. There's a huge number of pages here. Here's the problem. Most people don't necessarily use the Wizard of the Coast multiverse. I make my own. And
mm,
making my own usually consists of one page. And I have one line. I
yeah,
go to the water plane. There's water everywhere. I don't really need to say very much. We
it's
go to the
wet.
fire. We go to the fire plane. It's full of fire. If you're not immune to
Yeah,
fire, you will die. Um,
it's
you
hot.
know, yeah. So it's as simple as that. And I suspect a lot of people have the same approach. The one
Okay.
line world. It's you wind up just creating worlds that are like Star Wars, where every world is one
Oh,
environmental.
that's a good. Yeah, That's a good example for your planes. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a Star Wars universe.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, all right, let's
So,
move on because we've got
yes.
two big chapters to get through in half an hour.
Not
Uh,
not really. Not really. Keep going.
Chapter 7, Treasure. This is the chapter that most people. Well, this is the chapter that most people only used the previous Dungeon Master Guide for,
Mm,
and it's probably the most useful chapter. The one you'll be going to you'll be flicking through the most. So treasure themes, coins, trade bars, trade goods, gemstones, art objects, and then the big daddy of the treasure section, our magic items. And
mm.
that's divided into categories: rarity, how to award them, resilience, crafting magic items, artifacts, sentient magic items. And then it's listed from A to Z, and then we get a few random tables as well.
Yeah. I
Right.
liked the art object tables. Didn't think I would, but I looked at them and I was like, oh, actually, it's quite hard to come up with an idea for what an art object might be, how much it would be worth, and that it really, helps when you get stuck for ideas. So I actually liked that.
Hmm.
They're not huge, but they're big enough that I'll use them a few times before I run out of ideas and I have to go somewhere else. So that I like that bit. Um,
Yeah. So
and
yeah, they've included a lot more art in this section as well. I
yeah, there's
noticed.
artwork for every single item. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but okay, sure.
It's hard to tell with the
Yeah,
digital.
yeah, it is.
Yeah, one thing that pisses me off while it's on my train of thought, come on, Wizards of the Coast, make this a PDF that we can download. I
Yeah,
hate this whole friggin'
yeah, it
you have
is.
to be
It's
on.
so
Yeah, get with the times.
yeah, get with the
It's just
times.
so they can't retract anything, I guess.
Mm.
Uh,
I
I
don't think the
wish
categories of
I wish
magic
there was
items
a
needed to be there, though. That, you know how they have
yeah.
categories of magic items? It didn't need to take up so much space. Have the categories of magic items, yes, but they seem to take a lot of space up in the book just dealing with that.
I would have appreciated a list of magic like an appendix at the end of a list of magic items with the
Hmm.
page number
Yeah,
that you can quickly find because even they they divide it into sections. I still find it time consuming to flick through. Um, an appendix at the back would be great.
yeah.
Um, does it give you the most common one I have? I haven't given this section a really good read, so I might be asking you some questions here. So one of the main things that I run into with my games is the cost of magic items when
Yeah.
a player goes to a
Buy it.
city and wants to buy something. Yeah,
Mm.
is that easy to find now?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's easy. It's in here. It's in here. It always was in here, but it was a range. So, at
Mm,
least now I guess magic items have a set rarity and then and a price associated with that. And then
yeah.
you then add the price of the type of weapon or armor it is to get your price, rather than having a range that is quite wide. So you don't, like, which item is at the bottom of the range and which one is at the top of the range for a common magic item or whatever the heck it is.
Mm.
So they don't have prices on every single magic item. They haven't done that kind of. It's not that granular.
Why
Um,
can't they just include that
but I think
as
I
a
think
little
there's
bit of text next to each item?
I think the reason is around they don't want to force the dungeon master to have to contend with players who insist on going and buying stuff in a store. Um, the idea being that in the past you you would take magic items as if you could buy them, you would be lucky.
Mm.
2014 assumed you didn't have magic items. Now they assume that you do have magic items, but to buy magic items in a small place, you're only going to get common stuff and probably just consumables, right? Potions and scrolls and stuff like that. If you want other stuff, you might have to go to a city, more permanent magic items. And then some things will never be for sale because they're too powerful, because legendary and artifacts just don't sort of fall into that bracket. And then, some stuff you'll have to go and buy it from a special market that may be a black market or an auction or something like
Yeah,
that. So
I mean
yeah,
that's a fair comment, but that's to me that's DMs. That's up to you whether you
yeah,
make it available or not. I guess
yeah,
if you are putting something there, I've just found it now. So commons 100 gold pieces,
yeah,
uncommon 400, rare 4,000, very rare 40,000, legendary 200,000. Artifacts are priceless.
yeah. And
What did you
and this
think of
this
the
sorry, go.
magic item? What did you think of the magic item tracker?
I thought it was terrible. I thought it was
I hate the art. Oh my god, I hate the art on these trackers.
yeah.
On these,
It's not great. I think the problem is that the game 5e was never designed to require you to have magic items. They were like an extra benefit. Like,
Hmm.
you didn't need to have them to have to
So
play and be successful. So
is this a
this
balancing thing? Is this what it's for? Is this to help
it's
the DM
supposed to it's
balance?
yeah, it's supposed to give you guidance to say this is how you balance your game. This is how it should sort of look. It's
Yeah,
For me, I don't believe it's been tested in any way. I think it's probably a nonsense. Um, you know, giving out magic items and awards to characters for different levels. It's not going to be accurate. It's not a mathematical formula. I wouldn't rely
right.
on it. Um,
Yeah,
you again,
my
you probably can't go wrong with common magic items because their magical effect is so small It's when
Mm.
you start looking at the other stuff. If you're dealing with just potions and scrolls and stuff like that, things that are consumables, you're pretty safe. It's when you have permanent magic items that's where things get troublesome.
Yeah, yeah. Head of Vermin is
Mm.
my favourite common magic item. I love
Oh, the
giving
head
that
of
to
vermin.
players.
My
Yeah,
my 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 favorite one, and here the
I
new one.
love giving that to players.
My favorite one now is the new magic item, the Baba Yaga's dancing broom. Um,
Yeah,
but the cloak of billowing in my games has been very,
yeah.
very popular, and it's
Xenophos Guide had some really great common magic items. I'm glad to. So I haven't gone through the A to Z. I don't know what's new, what's been added. I haven't had time. That was a big. That's too.
yeah, it's too
I
granular.
didn't have
But
enough.
I do have some notes on it.
Okay.
I know that the crafting magic items is significantly simpler than it was before. It does have useful
Mm.
tables for costs and day.
Oh yeah, that's something we should look at. Crafting. Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
crafting is
point.
they've done a better job. The crafting magic items also includes good guidance and some semi-helpful tables, and intended use for the magic item, history, minor quirks, minor properties, quirks, beneficial, detrimental stuff, sentient stuff. That's there, and it's all in one place. It's not scattered throughout the book
See,
like
I can't. I can't
2014.
find. I can't find that section.
It is there. It is there. It just, yeah. It's where is it between? Gosh.
See, that's a problem already.
Well, yeah, yeah, but the index would probably solve that, but you don't have access to the index, right? Hopefully, the index
Mm.
does this. There are more magic items in this book. Many are reprinted. Um, there's a small collection that are new. The
Yeah.
concept of a magic item, you know, fortunately, it's no longer. It's been
So
dropped that it's optional. So you do assume that there is magic items in your world, which is something. It was always silly to
so
try to convince the community that magic items weren't necessarily something you had in your world. Like that was a bad thing to do. But
yeah. Well, it's a
what
fantasy
is the
world.
other thing? They did generic magic item concepts. So many of the magic items that used to be a sword or a spear or whatever or a javelin, you now just say you have a magic item. It could be ammunition, could be a weapon, could be armor, and you could do any kind of weapon, armor, or ammunition with whatever it is. Like a flame tongue could be a sword, it could be an axe, it could be whatever
Mm.
you like.
So
And
the good thing about the crafting system and this has only gone from me watching, I think it was Chris Perkins,
mm,
is they've made use of the toolkits,
yeah,
which I think is very smart because a lot of the time those toolkits were just junk that sat on the character sheet that they
yeah,
did nothing with. So that was a really smart way of incorporating, and it makes sense. Oh, I found it now. So I found it.
yeah. They included the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon character magic items in
Mm.
here. I thought that was smart. Good idea.
So here we go. So armor, you need to have the leather worker's tool or a smith's tool or a weaver's tool. For a potion, you need to either have the alchemist supplies or a herbalist kit. For a ring, you need to have a jeweler's tool. For a rod, you need to have woodcarver's tools. For a scroll, you need to have gosh, I can never say this word, calligrapher's supplies.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you don't have to go
For,
through it. That basically they
for
tell you what tools and
yeah,
what you need. So you need to, have Arcana. You need to have the spell, and you need to have
mm,
the necessary tools and skill to use it, and the materials. It's all sensible stuff. So it's pretty easy to work out.
right, cool. Any final thoughts on that one?
Nah,
15 minutes.
deal with
Okay.
bastions.
Yeah, chapter 8, Bastions.
Be quick. This one. This will. I mean,
Yeah.
really, I don't have a lot to say about the appendixes, so this is gonna be pretty fast.
Should should the Bastions even be in the DMG is probably my question.
No, I think it should be there. I always complained about
You
it.
do?
The Bastion system or strongholds is high level play. They have decided to start at level 5. I've done that
Level 5.
myself, but really, I still feel like it is the level 9, level 10 campaign.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different animal.
So
Um,
we've got gaining a Bastion, Bastion turns, Bastion maps, basic facilities, special facilities, Bastion orders, special facility descriptions, Bastion events, fall of a Bastion.
so, have you ever used strongholds or bastions in your games?
Yeah, well, Dragon Heist, I guess, would count because you give your players a tavern.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, to that extent, I have.
But did you ever need that level of complexity to run
No,
that? Yeah, and
no,
this
because
is
I blew it up.
well, I mean, that does help. But again, you didn't need that level of complexity, right? You just took a
No.
location and they could repurpose it and do it up. Bastion system is not very flexible. It's not going to fit every campaign, every adventure pace. It's not going to work for every single group. I'll make it quite clear that I don't necessarily use the Bastion system, but I use strongholds in my games. This is quite a common thing in my games. We do this whether it's a mobile stronghold like a ship, or whether it's fixed in location, depending on the campaign. I do this almost every campaign,
Mm,
but it's probably too soon. The bastions and magic items in DMG, it's really to get the players to buy the Dungeon Master Guide for the magic items and the bastion system. And Hasbro, obviously, is their marketing team, I think, are probably responsible for forcing this in and saying you need to make sure it's going to appeal to players. This doesn't feel like it appeals to a Dungeon Master. It feels like it's designed for players.
mm.
The thing is that players should always be looking after a bastion or a stronghold, in my opinion. Um, but it should also
So,
be optional. You know, every dungeon master should not have to deal with this. And the book does state this. Okay. But the thing is, too, it should not be so well defined that you feel like it's going to give them too much. And the Bastion system has a lot of maths that has been stripped out from Unearthed Arcana. They should have stripped it back even more. It's far too much detail. You know, I found personally that running strongholds in my game did not need that level of complexity. I could write everything I need in one paragraph. One
mm,
paragraph was all I required. And the DMG for 2014 had enough to be able to get that done. And I think they've gone a little bit overboard because each facility, for the characters, they get too many facilities. They get too many as they level up. Then you combine all those different special facilities for all the party members, and there's just a bucket load of these damn things. They're going to make a lot
yeah.
of money. They're going to have too many resources, and there's too many mechanical benefits rather than narrative-driven campaign or adventure resources.
Mm.
And this is basically Bastions has replaced the downtime activities, and I think that's a shame. That's really what they've done with this section. So
I think it's a good idea. It is something I can possibly test out because my players have shown interest in Transcender Mana. Is that what it's called? Transcender Mana?
Tresendal Manor, yeah, I did Tresendal Manor
Transcender
with my
Mana?
group. Yeah.
Yep. And they will be level 5 when
Mm,
they complete that adventure. So that
mm,
I could possibly roll this out easy enough in one of my games I'm running and road test it.
yeah.
I when I did so the great thing for a DM, the great thing about a player having a bastion is if you give your players a nice toy, it's a really good plot point because you can take it away. If you want to sort of yeah uh, make a camp nice it just gives you a device if they care about something and you have something bad happen to it, they will be motivated to do something about it, and it can really drive your games.
Well,
The one I used,
sorry, keep going.
sorry, the one I used a system off the DM Guild. I think it was called Durnham's Guide to Running a Tavern or something, and all it was a D100 table that I rolled on. We rolled on once a week, and it showed you that this event happened and that the pub either earned this amount of money or lost this amount of money, and that was it.
Hmm.
It was nice and simple, and that's how I ran that particular
Yeah.
stronghold in my game. And yeah, and wasn't complicated. I don't think my I think that they allowing I think players don't think about it as much don't think about the game as much as a dungeon master does outside of the game.
Mm,
So I think they are giving players a little bit too much credit that they want to do this downtown activity
yeah.
when
So
they're not at the table.
yeah. So here's the thing: is like when I did Tresendal Manor in the campaign last time, it was DM. Um, all I did is I had a paragraph of information: how much it cost to rebuild it, how long it would take, how much labor they would require. But really, even that was unimportant. You know, the team it will be whatever size it is. It's nebulous, and that's really all I really needed. And then I just said, you just tell me, just find a map or create a map, and that's your mana. Great,
Mm.
awesome. And of course, I just deducted the cost, the portion that was already built underneath. It was super simple mathematically. And then one of my players is a quantity surveyor, and so he wanted to break down and figure out all sorts of different things. That's fine, but not every group's got a quantity surveyor in their group, so you don't have to do any of that. But I let him do that because that's what he loves. So he played with that, and it was easy for him. He did it in like the space of about 20 minutes. He had all this stuff figured out, and he just told me, and I said, "Sure, JP, that's all good." And then somebody else said, "I'm not even going to worry about that. I'm
None
just
of
going to
this
use
is up to
magic."
code.
Yeah, yeah. One of my players said, "We're going to
You're going to
take
be
over the town." Yeah,
introducing health and safety into your
yeah.
game.
Well, he even insisted on buying up all of the empty
After
lots.
your
So they bought.
bastion, an NPC turns up
Yeah,
in a high vest with a clipboard
yeah.
and
They
assesses the
bought.
property.
Yeah. They bought up all the lots and then rented them out to people moving into Fandolin. So they basically became land barons, and then they stuck a wall around it so nobody could attack them. So and the wall was just created by magic, and I think one of the players just cast the same spell over and over and over again for many, many days until they finally had the complete wall. So it was
Oh
super
gosh!
simple and easy to figure out. Like, yeah. If you're going to use strongholds, you need to keep it simple, and this isn't simple enough.
All right, we need to get on the downward spiral. We've got 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's good. It's there. It
It's
is
there.
what it
Look,
is.
break
It's
it up
not
into
for us.
pieces. Break it up
Yeah.
into pieces. That would be my advice: is don't use the whole thing. Yeah.
So then we just get maps, lore glossary, and tracking sheet. So you got anything on these three
Yeah, the lore
items?
glossary. I think the lore glossary is pointless. It's only for new people. It will refer.
It's another IP placeholder.
It is basically just another IP dump. You'll refer to it once at best.
Yeah.
Even for new people, we're probably only going to read it
I
once.
think no, maybe it is. We might be coming at this because we're old. So this
Well,
might be a good. This might
but
be a
here's,
good thing where for younger players that are because not everyone knows who Dritz is or
but you do need.
Tiamat or whatever. So
I don't know every bit of lore about D&D, and I've played it for a long time. You just don't need to know this stuff. It's really not that important. If you want to know it, you experience it. Um, and this is part and parcel. It's a journey. If you get involved in D&D lore, it's because
yeah,
you've been playing the pre-made adventures. You've been involved in the lore in some way as a dungeon master or as a player. You do not need to learn this stuff. And I often find a lot of people do not care. I don't
no.
care about it. There were things in there I had not seen before, but I still do not care that I had read something I hadn't seen before. I just does
There's a
not.
reason the reason I just read 15 Dragonlance novels in the last year. So
Yeah,
I was interested in the lore.
yeah. I suspect most people will never use this section. It'll be a wasted place. It's another, as we said, multiverse, Greyhawk, lore section, reinforce the copyright so they can retain it as an IP. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
here's all
me.
the trademarks, man. The tracking sheets. I want to say I like the idea.
Yeah.
I appreciate that you can download them as a PDF. I think
hmm
that is very cool. They're also a writable PDF that you can use a computer.
hmm
I hate the art. It's so like cutesy.
Yeah, it's
And
designed for
just
young children. It's not even
it's
designed for
just
teenagers. It's definitely not
yeah,
a design for adults.
yeah.
The design of
Um,
the pictures.
I
I'm
like
not a
my
fan. Yeah,
I like my D&D heavy metal. Um,
yeah.
yeah, not like this.
But I mean, to be fair, even though I'm not a fan of the art or the approach, it's not the end of the world for me. I really ultimately couldn't care less if they want to
Mm.
stick fluffy little animals on there. I wouldn't mind. It doesn't bother me that much. I think the tracking sheets are a nice idea. They aren't always. Many of them aren't that useful, and the problem is that everybody takes notes differently, right? I take notes
Mm.
differently to you. We all have a different approach, so they need different things, and so tracking sheets they aren't perfect. They might need adjustment by individual DMs. The good tracking sheets that I looked in here that I thought were on the right track were the game expectations, the travel planner,
hmm
the
The
NPC
travel
one,
planner. The travel planner was the one I used the other day.
yeah,
That was good. Yep.
the NPC one, the settlement one, the Bastion one, and the DM character tracker. I thought,
Mm.
okay, they're on the right track. again. The poor ones, the ones that were kind of a waste of time for me, was the campaign journal one, which just 3 different designated areas. The campaign conflicts, also complete waste of time. The magic item one for characters, you know, it was a good idea, but I question the number of items they suggest that you fill out. I just don't think you needed that. Uh, Ultimately, in the end, I think what they should have done with the tracking sheets is they should have just had a downloadable PDF that you can get off the internet, download this thing. It has all the tracking sheets they have made as examples. And then in the book, just put in a small version of the tracking sheet on one page as an example. So that means take all, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever number there is. Just have a little small version and stick them all onto one page to show you this is
Yeah.
what tracking sheets can look like. That would have
Yeah.
been my preference. It's just taking up a bunch of space that didn't need to take up, as far as I'm concerned.
The maps are great. Dyson
Oh,
logo
yes.
always does a good map for me. They're probably people with VGTs might not like them because they don't look particularly flash. But in terms of teaching a dungeon master how to draw a map and what a map could look like, and they're very useful.
Yeah,
I think they're great. I have
yeah.
no problems with the maps as well.
Dyson logos,
Also,
easy to
yeah,
copy.
and just go on Dyson Logo's website as well because he's got heaps there for free
Yeah,
if you do like them. So,
yeah.
all right, final thoughts. We've got 5 minutes. So, do you want to go
Well,
first or do you want me to go first?
yeah, no, I'll go first. I think the map locations I really liked, because I had mentioned this in the first one. They had maps in the back, but they weren't really generic enough that you would reuse them. But they did a crypt, a caravan encampment, which I suppose some people would say could just be a campsite, but a campsite's so simple you don't need a map for that. A
Hmm.
village, a dragon lair probably won't necessarily, because dragon lairs tend to be different, but the hideout, the farmstead, the keep, the manor, the mine, the roadside inn, the ship, the spooky house, not so much the Underdark Warren, the volcanic cave, and
That's
the wizard's house.
actually the Underdark one's the one I actually had in my back pocket the other day. I was
Oh, okay.
possibly going to use, yeah, because in Sunless Citadel there's a tunnel that goes to the Underdark.
Mm.
They don't give you a map for, and I was like, I'll just use that if they
Yeah,
decide to go down there.
they're reusable.
Mm.
I think they've done a great job of making those things reusable and they're easy to copy. And I'm really pleased they've done this. I think it's great. I have heard that there are color versions for a virtual tabletop, but I could
Oh,
not
okay.
find it. So I
No.
suspect maybe, maybe you can find out that it's part of the D&D Beyond map application.
Master subscription. Maybe
Yeah,
you get a
maybe it's
color
there.
vision.
Yeah, and
All right.
and then the map for Greyhawk World and the city map. So for me, yeah, this is a better Dungeon Master guide than I've seen before. It's just not built for experienced Dungeon Masters. It's built for new people.
Yep. My final thoughts. It's a big upgrade from the 2014. It does feel like a greatest hits, and I'm not
Yeah.
meaning that to be sarcastic or negative at all. It is. If you're a brand new dungeon master, this is probably one of the best dungeon master guides they've done in years.
Mm.
But as a if you've already been playing the game for years, this isn't a necessary purchase at all.
No, no. If you've got AD&D First Ed Edition Dungeon Master Guide and you can read the text because it's so fucking small, you've
Mm.
probably got all you need. You probably don't need and particularly if you're experienced, you wouldn't need anything else.
Yep.
Because
But
that's pretty much got
if you've got
everything.
money, yeah, if you've got money to burn,
Yeah.
if money's not an option, it's not a bad purchase. It's a solid DMG.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Particularly for
Yep.
beginners. It's definitely a beginner tool.
Yep. So yeah, yeah, I'll give it a thumbs up.
Yeah,
What
I
I've
give it a
seen.
thumbs up too. Yeah, if you're a beginner, buy this one. If you don't have a Dungeon Master Guide, this is a decent one to buy. And if you're
Mm.
experienced, I think go spend your money on something else.
Yeah,
Go get
yeah,
your
and
fingers done,
also, yeah, I mean,
paint your nails.
this book had this book this book had me when I saw a dwarf shooting a troll with a shotgun. I was That's my favorite thing about this book.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that is cool. It's fucking cool. All right, we'll wrap it up there with 1 minute. So yeah, thank you everyone. AJ will be back next week. Not too sure what we're going to discuss. We might dive back into Star Wars, but yeah. All right, that's good night from me.
And good night from somebody else. So I think that's me.
That's you, mate. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone.